Well, good morning, gentlemen. I'm tempted to say it's good to be back, but nobody knows the difference who's listening.
Yeah, we took a little hiatus.
Well, I was having more fun.
You were. What did you do?
My wife and I celebrated our 24th anniversary out in Zion National Park. So we went and got lost, and it was a beautiful thing. And did some hiking and saw some beautiful stars and realized how small we are and how big God is. And it was awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like an awesome thing.
Sounds like it was.
Was it? Did you actually do some intense rock climbing, or
No.
was it just laid back, kind
For
of
me,
enjoying it?
There was a couple of points. For me, it wasn't. It was medium. I mean, I felt it the next day, so I wasn't. When you're not in shape, we did enough.
Mm-hmm.
So the last day we did a hike, we realized we were just a little bit more tired. Like we just didn't have the energy, and plus, the first couple of days you're dealing with a little bit of altitude, so you're breathing a little heavier. And we were up about 7,200 feet. So
Did you stay in like an Airstream or something like that?
Well, the story is we were glamping initially, but it was so cold. It got down to about freezing 32, and it was so cold that we had a little stove and with a wood stove, and so I found myself every hour on the hour putting more wood because it was a small stove and it burnt out very quickly. So I got about an hour and a half of sleep the first night, and I'm like, that's not going to happen. So we actually drove down and stayed at a hotel, and we're just a lot more comfortable. I think I would love that. I like camping and stuff, but I don't
Like freezing?
I don't like,
you like
freezing.
Sleeping?
I like sleeping. Yeah, I don't sleep well when it's really cold outside.
And when you were glamping, was it like a tent or like an Airstream? Okay.
It was
cool.
It wasn't not an
32
Airstream.
degrees in a tent is cold.
Yeah, it's canvas, so the heat didn't stay in. That's the challenge, right? If it was an Airstream or something that was insulated, it would have been great because you could have started a fire and maybe stoked it one time during the night. But this was like every hour on the hour, man. That wood was just burning. Yeah, and the heat just went right through the canvas. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
But it was cool. It was cool. I wanted to really like it. Like if it was in September, maybe about 10 degrees warmer, perfect, I think it would have been fine. But so we did that. And we flew into Vegas, so we stayed at the Bellagio the first night. And they gave us a window right over the fountain, and that was nice. I'm not a big fan of Vegas typically. It's not my destination place.
I'm not the same.
But it's the closest airport to where we're going, so we took advantage of it. And
how long a drive from Vegas is it?
about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
It's not horrible. It's nice. It's beautiful too. So it's a beautiful drive out there. Yeah.
Where is that in relation to the Grand Canyon?
It's only about 2 hours away from the Grand Canyon. So
isn't Vegas like 2 hours from the Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
So it's just a different direction.
Just a different direction. Yeah.
Got it.
So it's kind of like a triangle. If you ever wanted to do it, you can do it. And there's it's so beautiful. So first time there, and I would suggest anyone if they have a chance to go.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's a reason why they call it Zion. It's heavenly.
That's great.
It's beautiful. I'm jealous. I spent I went to a wedding in New York for a week.
All right. Did you get
to the city or to where were you?
No. We flew into Long Island. And we
Long Island.
Long Island. We flew into Long Island and then we stayed there with family. Had a lot of fun. Going to New York in October is like the best time to go, right? That whole area. It's beautiful. It's got like pumpkins and apple picking and all that kind of stuff, right? Did that. Stayed with some family out there, and then we went to a wedding in New Jersey, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then we flew out of Philadelphia.
Oh.
Yeah, on same day as Game 2 is World Series.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So now they're tied 2-2, I think. Well, it won't be when you hear this, but yeah.
Yeah, and Thursday night
it was
football.
a little
I
insane.
was watching Thursday night football last night. It's kind of surreal.
The Eagles are crazy right now.
The same team that was playing are the same teams that are in the World Series.
Yeah.
It was Houston.
Yeah.
Houston.
Yes.
How ironic.
And Houston got stomped.
Actually, they didn't get stomped.
Well, they did a lot better than I expected.
Tied up until
towards
the third.
Towards the end, they pulled away. Mm-hmm. But the Eagles, man, they have our boy AJ Brown. He's just, I don't know how we let him go on the Titans.
We were mourning.
What
that the
are
whole
we
game.
doing? I'm just like, I don't know what the Titans. Anyway,
So Bob, outside of watching Monday Night Football, what else you been up to?
It's Thursday. It was Thursday night football.
Oh, Thursday night. I'm sorry, Thursday night.
Today's Thursday.
Yeah, it's a great segue. Thank you. So you're holding in your hands a copy of my latest book. Our Digital Soul, which I wrote with Jenny Black, who's my co-author. And it's subtitled Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Toward Recovery. So that just came out.
So I can barely write an email. How do you write a book?
It's a lot. That's about 2 years, 2.5 years worth of work. Wow. So I do know writers that write fast. I'm not one of those. So it does take a lot of effort and time and focus. But there's also lots of different strategies for writing books too. So it's not just I'm going to sit down every day in front of my computer, which is one strategy. That's not mine necessarily. So I usually like to partner with people because I know that the more that we can partner, it makes us stronger and it can bring different points of view. But it also allows us to kind of each take pieces of chapters and review it and work on it together. So that was a strategy that I used.
So this book is called Our Digital Soul, Collective Anxiety, Media Trauma, and a Path Toward Recovery. How many books have you written total?
This is my fourth book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And let's get into this a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about
Sure.
why you wrote it, what you talk a little bit about the content, and then what you want from this book. Like, what do you
Just gonna
hope this
show it
book
to the
does,
camera
or what? Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's a big question because I think anytime you birth a creative project, you have an idea of what you want, but it usually takes on its own life. I believe that. I believe that all of us have creative ideas that are longing to be birthed, and if we don't birth them, they will be birthed through someone else. So for me, I'm trying to hold it lightly and say, this is a culmination of my career to this point. I've been obviously in the digital marketing, strategy, communication world for 20 plus years. And in that time, and we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, I've observed and been involved in a lot of things that really piqued my curiosity about human behavior and psychology and other things, why people respond to what they do. I believe a big part of effective marketing is psychology. And I think we are, whether we acknowledge it or know it or not, we're psychologists with our clients. We're basically sitting down and going, what do you want people to do? I'm an expert and I can help you to get people to do that and to respond and engage with your message. That's psychology, right? Because at the end of the day, what makes one person respond to something over another, that's what they're paying you good money for. So
it's either psychology or manipulation.
Yeah.
One of the
I
two.
mean, behavioral psychology applied to business is really what we do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a saying that I've kind of adopted, that good marketing is psychology and math. It's really that. It's getting people to respond and engage and then measuring it and scaling it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the precipice for a lot of my journey. And then during COVID, I went back and got a master's degree in behavioral and organizational psychology to learn more and just to try to push that door open a little bit more in my life. And that led me shortly after that time I met Jenny, who is a licensed marriage and family counselor here in Nashville and Franklin. And she'd been talking and dealing with what she kind of coined media trauma for several years and working with people and families and kids. And one of the comments she made was, when we first met, I was at an event. She said the screen life and cell phones is not a problem in the therapy office anymore, but it's become the number one problem. She said it's the number one issue. When people come through my door, it's either marriages that are in trouble, that, there's some sort of something going on with someone else, or, whatever it may be, or a kid, or it all boils down to many times the level of anxiety and insecurity and body image, or affairs or whatever it may be, it all comes back around to screen life. So she noticed that trend in her practice and began to really dig into that. And much of the book is a lot of her own personal experience and journey and struggle with it, as do I share a lot of my own things in there in my life and experiences. So that's really where we came together, and we said, okay, well, I'm coming at it from a very pro-technical, pro-technology viewpoint, and working in it from a career standpoint. She's coming at it from a therapist, and she has to deal with the negative aspects of it. Is there a way that we could come together and write something that could address all of these things? Like how do we acknowledge the real deeper issues that are going on? And then also, is there a way forward? Because we do know that it's not going away. So how do we deal with that? So that's really how the book started. And it's taken about, like I said, a good 2 years to get it done. We're to the point where we both feel comfortable. And now it's out on Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you have 5 types of media trauma in here, right? Is that true?
Yes.
You want to run through each one?
Yeah.
Like what? So the book's broken down into some context, right, and some education, and then 5 types of media trauma, and then how you move forward, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Instead of talking about all 5,
by the way, you start with your relationship with your phone.
Mm-hmm.
How is your relationship with your phone?
My relationship with my phone is rocky because
Why?
It doesn't recognize my face all the time.
Really?
And I feel bad about it.
Yeah, it makes me feel bad.
It's
an odd thing, the relationship with the phone. I want to know because I was just on a trip with 4 kids, and we really keep our kids, because I've worked in technology, because I'm just so close to this stuff. I'm keeping my kids. We keep them pretty away from all those things. And my strategy is later in life, because I went until I think I had my first phone in college. So I'm like, I think that's possible. And so that's kind of like at least my goal. We'll see how that goes. But my point is what's interesting is when, is a phone and any screen, is it a screen, or is it truly a phone screen? Because and I don't mean like it just a phone, but my point is like we have iPhone and iPads, right? And that we know that those are addicting because we have all kinds of things. But also we have a Switch, like a Nintendo Switch that
that does YouTube and probably everything else.
Well, no, we just play games on it, but when we were away, we have long drives, and so they were playing. And like, what's interesting is like, there's like, even after like an hour, there's like this addiction that comes to it, that's very noticeable for especially a little kid. Like 2 hours later, they're like, when am I going to get that Switch back? And I'm like, you haven't played it in like 3 weeks, but so I don't know. I've always wondered, is it a phone? And the things that come with it, or is there something more? Is there something about, like, we've been addicted to radio and then TV, right? And then phones, and game consoles and those kind of things. Is it more? Is it deeper than that?
What, even Steve Jobs used to limit his kids on screen time, which says a lot. Luckily, I didn't get my first iPhone until I was in my 40s.
Me and Bob got our first iPhone together.
Really? Only
15 years ago.
Only because they didn't have it when it shows my age. But, I always think about, I've been kind of doing some like mental test in my life. And one of the things is I'm trying to get myself to do more positive things where I go into flow. Because I feel like it's healing. Where I think there is that, and I don't know what it's called, Bob. You probably can identify more. It may be in your book, but there's a sense of flow with video games and gaming and screens, and you can get lost. It's a type of flow, right? But it's not. But I don't think it's actually something that's helping your brain. Where I think maybe like a creative flow can heal, and there's a sense of positive. where this other flow is draining, and it ignites these areas of your brain that, and what I've seen, that that make you anxious. It doesn't give back. And maybe, Bob, you can kind of talk a little bit more about that. I'm just telling you what I see from a layman's point of view. You probably have more specific language that you talk about it in more of a clinical way. But I want to talk a little bit about that, because I feel like it's like depleting. My wife calls it's sucking your brain out. And it does. It sucks something. It's maybe that's why we use the word suck, because it kind of does suck.
Right.
It's not giving back, and it's draining and taking.
I would say a couple of things. There's two conversations here, but you both hinted on video games versus everything else. And I would say the studies show, and I'll just talk about the science first, that video games that are not like connected and you're engaging with other people online, which most of the video games do now. But in your case, just talking with a Switch, where you're just playing the game, there's actually, believe it or not, there's all the science and the studies show now that actually there's a lot of positive things about it, about what it helps kids to do, problem solving, response times, logic.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Yeah. So if we're just talking video games alone, now I think that obviously limiting the time.
Well, there's like two sides of that coin, right? Which is just like anything else, right? You can get addicted to anything. It's just, I guess what I'm speaking to is, it's so interesting. It's not a bad thing necessarily. The way I'm saying it is, the draw is so strong.
Yeah. Yes, the draw is strong, and that's kind of the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is our particular cell phone, iPhone screen engagement, internet work. That's totally different. It's a different part of your brain that you're engaging than a kid playing on a Switch necessarily. They can both be extremely addicting, but I would say, to your point, Brad, where you're talking about sucking your brain, I think if we frame it like, okay, any new technology, and there's been a lot of people who have written this over the past 75 years, actually, but we're just starting to see the effects of it. Every new technology is an extension of us. Okay, so if you think of the wheel, it was an extension of our feet, right?
Yeah.
And so once somebody invented the wheel, they're like, oh, we can move things faster. It was an extension of our labor and our backs and our arms, right? So we didn't have to carry things as hard and as heavy. We could pile it up in a wagon.
Yeah.
And the wheel became to the car. Okay, so that extension of our feet where we would travel and go, every technology is an extension of us.
Yes.
And I think we have to frame it that way versus it's just a tool and it's separate from me. No technology is ever separate from us. So the television and movies were an extension of our eyes, right? And they're extension of our imaginations, and they're extensions of writing, all of those things. So if you look at it like that and go, okay, this new invention, this piece of technology, what is it an extension of? What does it make more efficient? It's an extension of us. And here's where we talk about in our book, and what most people miss. If it is an extension of us, every technology, then it fundamentally changes us, right? So if I was walking 25 miles a day and there was no such thing as cars, I'm a different human being in many, many ways than I am when I get and sit for 30 minutes up and 30 minutes back every day, and I can travel across the country and I can do things, right? I'm a fundamentally different human being,
also
right?
Physiologically,
that's what I mean.
Because your muscles, you're working out. Yeah,
exactly.
I got what you're saying.
Physiologically, psychologically.
Yeah.
And it also changes us as communities, right? Like there would be no such things as suburbs without the invention of the car. There would be no such things as highways. There would be no such things as living out of the city. And so people who live in the city, they walk everywhere. They don't need cars, right? So you just take that a step further. So what is the computer and the cell phone an extension of? It's an extension of our brains, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing, right? If I extension my arm and I build a really good tool or shovel or a hammer or my strength, I invent tools for leverage. If I invent ways to light things up, that's one thing. But when the computer came along, it said this is extensions of our brains. It makes our brains, makes us more efficient. We can tabulate things. We can pull information up. So what does that do over time as it grows? It becomes more and more sophisticated. And so we rely less on our brains and more on these things, or in conjunction with. So what then is the internet? What is the internet? It's a further extension of our brains, and I would argue it's an extension of our nervous systems, right? Because everyone is connected. We're connected into this ever-increasing symbiotic world that we all tie into, whether it's Google, whether it's the cloud, whatever we want to call it. And we're getting our life force, whatever it may be, positive, negative, i.e. our nervous systems are getting hits of dopamine. We're seeing what's going on in the world and we're being shocked. We're seeing our friend's life and we're saying, we're connecting with them and going, isn't that wonderful? I'm so happy to see my kids and my grandkids' photos that I never would have been able to see. It's relationship, but it's also we're tied in together into a symbiotic nervous system.
That sounds exhausting.
It is.
Well, when you put it in
just said that, I was like,
that's a revealing concept.
That's
yes.
And this is interesting because I saw an email from my daughter's college about how the engineering school just added this supercomputer and the amount of calculations it can do, billions of calculations in like a second. And I'm like, if we're connected to that and we have all that data, and if we're connected in a way that this is an extension of ours, our brains, I don't believe, are set up to handle that much information. It's literally overwhelming, especially if it has to do with an emotional tie as well to our brain.
Well, I've used the quote before.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What was your quote?
I was going to say the quote from E.O. Wilson. I've mentioned this on the show. And it's always good to go back to because it does frame that, noticing your...
It's a beautiful color.
Yeah, we should have that.
Oh, that's a good...
Yeah.
Did you pay Apple for that color?
Just so you know, there's if you can't see this, there's the color on Bob's book is the same color as the Ken's.
It's the Apple iPhone case.
Yeah,
and this is not brown.
That's Pantone 85. Just so you know. I don't know what it is.
It's not brown. This is sand. No, I don't know what it is. Some other name.
Anyways, we digress.
So anyway, the quote from the biologist E.O. Wilson is, the problem with humanity is we have Paleolithic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying, right? It's like our brains haven't changed much in about 20,000 years, if not longer, meaning we're smarter, we have more information, we are different. But if you were to take a Paleolithic era human and put them next to a 21st century human, they would still feel the same pain and anxiety and anger and anxiousness over whatever they're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
One is a bear chasing you in the jungle, and the other one is, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss my deadline and I'm going to get fired, right? The response of the brain doesn't really know any different.
Yeah.
But to your point, when we have medieval institutions, meaning we still kind of structure in the way that we have in the last several hundred years as far as our environments, our economies, the structures are very similar, but our technology is light years ahead of those. So you can't plug a Paleolithic brain and expect it to keep up with godlike technology.
Do you think, though, in the future, I'm obviously we're in the infant stage of technology, of what the screen, right? Let's just face it, we haven't gone through 100 years of this yet. Do you feel that AI in the future can help manage a human being? Can let me see how to explain this. Can be able to regulate on its own how much information is too much, or where emotionally a human being is, to the point where the AI will actually be kind of like a therapeutic way to say too much this, too much that. I can tell because of some way that this human, me or whoever else, is reacting, or their mental state or their physical state. Maybe it's based on like heart rate and
there's
blood
already
pressure.
There's already tools that do that. I mean, just as in the simple, example of, I'll get notified on my Apple Watch if there'd be like, hey, you seem a little stressed out. Maybe you should like breathe or like.
So when that breathing thing comes on, is that based on my heart rate, or is that just a regular like, hey, it's been 3 hours, you haven't really moved much.
Well,
go breathe.
The app that I use is used. It's all tied in with heart rate and activity and things like that. But to your point, I think that is a lot of people working on that a lot, and I think that is a healthy direction on the way that we need to go.
Do you think though, I know this is getting probably too deep, but do you think the AI initially will actually make us to the point where we become so self-focused and centered? Because let's face it, when we do hard things as human, we gain character, we gain who we are, right? And it feels like the world is getting more to the point where nobody wants any pain. And so they kind of live, unfortunately, I think it's kind of they're living very and I do the same thing. So I'm in the same camp, but very self-centered. Like I just want to be comfortable all the time.
Right.
Comfortable. I just want to be comfortable. And it's a self-centered kind of approach. Do you think that with AI and way things are going, because it's giving you what it feels you are pleased by. It's giving you what you feel is making you the most calm person. Like, I don't know.
I think
I know that sounds deep.
Yeah,
and it's probably
no,
off on a tangent, but
it's not. And I want to talk about briefly in order to get to that.
Yeah,
is maybe the different types. Well, let's define media trauma, because that's what the book is, and then define like what are some symptoms, and then we can talk about like what are some ways to move forward and be helpful, because the good news in all of this is that your brain has plasticity and you can heal and you can change at any time.
Good.
It's like this is not a negative message of, well, you're addicted and you're stuck and you can't do anything. It's like you could change any time. And that's a beautiful thing about being humans and our brains is, at any age you can develop different habits, et cetera. So let's just define media trauma. So we define media trauma as experiences through media and personal devices that hinder or harm our capacity to be mentally whole. So there's big T traumas, which most people know, okay, you get in a car crash, or there's sexual abuse, or there's war. Those are big T's. But there's a lot of small T's that we all deal with that sometimes we underplay. So the small T's that screen life gives us on a regular basis, whether it's ourselves or our kids, it's things like momentary challenges of resources, right? You feel like you don't have enough of what it takes to get through the day or to finish a task because you're distracted all the time, or constant doses of perfectionism, right? If you lean toward that, and as a perfectionistic person, and you're constantly getting a dose of perfectionism,
which is like the comparison, thing, right?
Like, I'm not living up. Oh, what's Sally doing? Oh, she has a perfect life. Oh, he's got the perfect job. Oh, I don't. A constant doses of that's very taxing, and that can affect us mentally. Constant doses of criticism.
I mean, you definitely see that with younger, like in the teenage or even younger age of that, especially as a teenager, especially it seems like with girls more than guys. It seems like they deal with that at a very early age.
Yeah. And how about this one? Constant doses of not being included. Like I can remember as a child being left out in a game, or my friends all went somewhere and they didn't ask me to come. Right. So those are individual things that I can point to. And as an adult man, I can go, wow, I remember that. And I remember that hurt.
It's the beauty of being an introvert.
Right.
I was just like, thank God.
Yeah.
But imagine, I'm thinking to myself, I'm an Enneagram 5. I'm like, I don't really feel that way. I'm actually, but it was good sometimes. I can go home and
imagine growing up,
be alone.
But imagine growing up today where
you see it all the time.
It's like
in your feed,
like 5 times an hour.
Yeah, that would be tough. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And especially when your close friends are not including you. And you know what happens? We know that, but now it's obvious and transparent. And I think that's the hard part for the young, for especially for
it's more frequent, it's more transparent, it's more obvious, and it's probably less legitimate too. It's less genuine.
My daughter is an extrovert. She's actually an Enneagram 7, so she's always like fear of missing out. And I noticed when she was in high school, she's strong. Like I know that but there was times where you could tell she was like bummed because her friends, she saw on social media, friends were doing something without her, you know, and you could tell it was a little, you know, you could tell in her spirit. But I know I just know that as an adult that still happens. And I think if you're more meant to feel those things, you're feeling them probably stronger than I even know, because I'm not, that's just not my makeup, but I know there are people that are, and that would even hurt as an adult.
Yeah. This next one is one that we all deal with no matter what our personality types. And that's addictive hits of dopamine that real life cannot match. That's one of the biggest ones, meaning I can arrange my feed and the algorithms and the companies. This is the way they make their money, is keep you coming back to get that small hit of satisfaction, whatever it may be, that real life can't really match. I can't get that feeling of whether it's likes or compliments or those funny, endearing cat videos or whatever it may be that turns you on in some small way. That's not a normal way that humans live, right? Like we don't function that way unless you're in we would call that a really unhealthy environment, right?
Yeah.
Imagine in the real life, your mom or your dad or your friends were around you going, Ken, good job. Oh, you're
Johnny.
awesome.
Good job, Bobby.
I can't believe it.
Oh, you did your book today.
You're beautiful. Like 20 times, 100 times an hour. That would be a really unhealthy
Thumbs up,
environment.
Ken. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
You're gonna say something.
Andrew Huberman, who I think is a neuroscientist, and he also has an amazing podcast, would say that the dopamine, the frequency of dopamine hits that we get daily is the number one societal problem because they're way more frequent than it ever has been in history, and so his he actually has a lot more science behind it, and probably just listen to him. But his basic prescription is stop celebrating so much, which is a little counter because it's not even saying don't look at social media. It's saying when you accomplish something, celebrate less, because the more awards you get for things, and I guess you tend to need those things to continue on, right? Which is why he says, in his opinion, I think he says that like one of the worst things is giving a trophy to every kid in a soccer game, which I just had three soccer teams that just no, I didn't do it, but that got trophies.
I was just thinking about that. My nephew now, he's in his 20s, used to be on one of the best youth hockey teams in the country, and they won second place at this big tournament. And the coach had a trash can right before the locker room and had them dump their trophy in there. Every one of them dumped your trophy. You didn't get first place, dump your trophy in the trash.
Well, see now
I thought that was genius. To be honest with you,
I think it is, and I think our society has come to where some maybe hard truths are seen as unkind.
Yeah.
And so everyone gets an award, but we know throughout history that that's just not the case,
and
right?
That's what I'm talking about. This whole thing of
like you said,
over celebrating yourself.
You know what
the point
brings
where
to my mind is your professor who ripped up those papers. You say that story all the time, right? Like,
it's like
you worked all night and he ripped up your work.
The algorithm is making all of us narcissists.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree. We become the center of our own universe, but worse than that, we become the center of everybody else's universe. Meaning, okay, in pre-screens, pre-computers, let's go back 75 years, okay? If something happened in a community or in a neighborhood, and if something was, and we all would take our turns with difficult things in life, okay? So Billy lost his mom, so the community comes around him and, cares for him. And, a month later, Sue's grandma's in the hospital, or, Joe lost his job. We all take our turns going through difficult things, and everybody rallies around and either observes or participates and helps, right? So we have helpers around us. Now we are not only observing, but we become the center and participate in everybody else's anxiety in the world, right? So nobody is able to not experience it and live it and take their own turn, but they're actually living it with them and through them and in them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when we see the war in Ukraine, we are all simultaneously living and experiencing that. Not literally there, but we might as well be, because we're seeing it, and we can see it from every angle, many different times.
And 24/7.
24/7 at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And so what does that do to us as human beings, where we don't have the time to go, okay, now it's my turn to go through a difficult time. And there's going to be people around me that are not going through it, that are not feeling the same thing, but they can be empathetic. So it takes away our sense of empathy, because we're not only observing it, but we're feeling it. It's what we went through in the pandemic. It's like that was a taste of it. Like we weren't just, oh, so-and-so got COVID and let's make sure we take care of the family. It's like we're all struggling just to keep our head above water. That's what being tied into this nervous system that we're all in, that's what it does to us. So that's the little T's that compound over time, the little T's trauma that we all feel. But I wanted to talk about just briefly, because I know we're running short on time here, is what are some symptoms that you can say, hey, I may have some issues here I may have to deal with. So there's 5 of them. I'm going to talk about 3. The first one is fear and mistrust. We need to acknowledge that in a world that's informed by our screens, we're going to be triggered by fear. That's what drives much of it. There's the big fears that we all know about, whether it's disasters or the economy. But there's also fears, whether it's politics, whether it's, like I said, being inadequate or being left out. Those are real fears for many of us. They're anxieties, and they're soft, meaning, oh, okay, so-and-so is going to the prom, but I didn't get asked. Or so-and-so got a raise, apparently, because look at that new car he bought, and I didn't get a raise. What's wrong with me? There's those fears that are compounded on another one. But I think we're all walking around with a giant fear button on our chest that algorithms...
Anyone can press
at any time. And if someone else doesn't press it, we press our own, because we're being trained. So I think if you find yourself constantly being fearful and mistrusting of the world, there's probably a good chance that you've been affected in some way, because fear and mistrust is what is being sold out there. The next one I would say is loss of interest or pleasure in non-screen activity. When you don't want to engage with your hobbies away from screens, when you don't want to go outside, when you don't want to enjoy the world. In research, when a human is healing and they're getting over whatever the trauma or mental issue or addiction, there's several signs, but one of them is an interest and a recurrence in hobbies and crafts and working with your hands and doing things that take time and attention and focus. That's when a human being is healing. And when there's a lack of interest for those things, that you don't want to do those things, but you'd rather sit and scroll the news or be on social media or be checking your phone constantly, and you no longer, if your hobby was painting, or if your hobby was, playing a sport or getting outside and riding mountain biking, and you don't have any interest for that anymore, it could be a sign that you need to really think about your engagement and your relationship with your phone. And then the third one I would say is a big one, which is guilt. You're constantly like, oh, I need to not be on my phone so much around my kids. I know I shouldn't be on my phone. Oh, I know I shouldn't be checking my email right now in church, or whatever it may be. This is a constant awareness of guilt for engaging and using it, but you still do it anyway. that's a real sign too. And we use this example too, and we don't use it lightly. But I think there's a really good case, and a lot of the psychologists and researchers that we've talked to. Sorry, here I am on my phone reading my notes. And that's a called yeah. Let me just get through this one thing, and I want to hear from you. But this is important, and that's something called a trauma bond in a relationship. Now I want to read the definition, and then I'm going to change one word. Trauma bonds are emotional bonds with an individual that arise from a recurring cyclical pattern of abuse perpetuated by intermittent reinforcement through rewards and punishment. Right. So if someone is in a relationship with someone and it's abusive, as you see this a lot in marriages, specifically with an abusive husband, but it happens could be with abusive wife as well, that they're abusive and everyone knows it's abusive, but they say, I love this person and I can't leave them, right? Yeah. That's a trauma bond, meaning that there's a cycle of abuse from rewards and punishment. I love you, but I'm going to beat you. I love you. Don't leave me. I need you. Oh, I just got angry, right? So that's what trauma bonds are, people who can't separate from that. But let me change a word. Trauma bonds are emotional bonds with a device or a technology that arise from a recurring cyclical pattern of abuse perpetuated by intermittent reinforcement through rewards and punishment. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Wow.
You're gonna say
no.
Something
I think no. I was just commenting how you're on your phone talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, but I think that's well. Here's my question. So, two things. One, as social media, net positive, net negative. If you could remove it from the world, would you do that? Taking your professional side out of it, and like, I realize that there's downside.
Would we be better humans today?
Right.
Yes. Can we use it as? Here's the thing. I believe that humans are resilient, and I also believe that with any change or evolution of our awareness, there's always going to be a negative to that. Just like childbirth, right? Like, it's painful, it's messy, it can be gross, and you could go to the point of death in it, right? But it's beautiful at the end of it. And I think that kind of is where we are right now. I'm hopeful.
And is part of that, because I look at it, because I would say the same thing, and then I ask myself why, and I don't know why you think that is. Is it possible that social media, like let's say like when packaged baked goods were first invented, right? It went from like you could only have an apple to now you go to the grocery store and you can buy a pack of cookies, and no one knew how bad, or let's say soda, right? You never knew how bad it was for them, so they just drank tons of soda, right? Same with cigarettes, right? Like you didn't know how bad it was for cigarettes, so everyone just smoked like crazy. And then people started realizing it, but we were already addicted as a society, and so pulling back from that addiction took a lot of time. But my point is it because we haven't, the population doesn't have the discipline muscle exercised? It's only recently that we've been aware that it's dangerous. But we're already addicted. And so education and also self-development in removing that addiction, I guess my point is, does it get better over time? Like other things that could be addictive, right? You got a lot of things that could be addictive.
I mean, I think about the whole meta universe and stuff that's happening and being built is like, are we in the birthing stage right now of this, where it's hard right now and it's painful, but it's going to get better and it's going to be positive and healthy for us in the future somehow, some way?
Oh, well, let me just take 3 steps back to the E.O. Wilson, and I always go back to this. To answer both your question this is a great example of Paleolithic brains and godlike technology, right? Yeah. So we're trying to retrofit this crazy godlike technology. And when I say godlike, I'm not using that lightly. I'm saying if you were to explain this technology to someone 120 years ago, they'd be like, that's magic. Sure, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's real. And so to your point, Ken, to answer your question, it's more than just the first step is self-awareness. And that's why we wrote the book, right? Let's be aware of it. Let's unpack it. Let's look at the facts and let's try to do better as individuals. Okay. But I think the next step, to your point, is we've got to build, we've got to influence the future generations. Computer engineers need to be knowledgeable of these things. I think there needs to be philosophy and ethics and morality classes taken in addition to and alongside of people who create these things. I think of Tristan Harris in the Center for Humane Technology out in California, who's really trying to push forward and fight for this. And I would say, just like the tobacco industry, that at some point there has to be a collective and or government intervention in a lot of these things to say, this is going to be warning signs. We're going to not allow this to certain ages. I know that's radical and it probably feels a little anti-capitalistic, but if something is harming you to the degree of, high suicide rates, anxiety, stress, to me, that's no different than smoking and getting lung cancer. It's the same thing. So I think all of those things I just threw out a lot. I think we can and we will do better.
Well, handing it to someone whose brain isn't fully developed is the same as handing a cigarette to someone, in my opinion.
I know there's so much more to unpack on the book, and I know there's a whole area that we talk about what to do, right? That we all know the issue. We all know this. I mean, we're unpacking some interesting ideas. Do you think that we need to, I'd like to put that into another episode.
Absolutely.
So that we can talk more about that. Because I think we brought up some great points. And I think the next episode, I'd like to talk about the rest of the story, and some of the solutions and some of the things that we can do proactively, and where that positive is. You were talking about with Jenny Black, the other author that you wrote this with, that you kind of like a yin and yang, like she comes from seeing this trauma firsthand and having to deal with it. And you work in the industry that actually promotes it. Right. So you're kind of like, you're kind of like her antagonist, but you're on the same side, obviously. And there's a solution to this. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe what the solutions might look like, both from her point of view as well as your point of view, and what we can do as marketers to incorporate into that conversation.
I think I agree. I would say before we end, because our audience or listeners are obviously agency people, what do they get from this? Like, why should they read it? Why should professionals read this? Just real quick, I know we'll dive into it, because it would be amazing if everyone went and bought this on Amazon, right? It's called Our Digital Soul by Jenny Black and Bob Hutchins. And
you can also look.
By the way, I love the title is awesome.
Thanks.
That is a really great title. I think it's
when we came up with that, we both looked at each other and we said,
that's the one.
That's it.
Yeah. Every time you've told me that in the last 6 months or so, I've been like, man, and I wish I had that idea.
When I first saw the cover of the book, I'm like, what is that? And I realized what it is. I know what it is, but I like the simplicity of it. And to be honest with you, it feels, when I look at it, it doesn't feel like a marketing book. It feels like it feels more therapeutic.
That's exactly,
and more of like a medical type of, I guess.
That's exactly what we said is, number one, if we were to look at a bullseye, the first bullseye is mental health and wellness professionals. We want to get into hands of all of them. So it's a resource for them, and it does come across. It appeals heavily to professionals in that field, but also there's a secondary circle that it's everybody else who works in and around it, and parents and things like that. So hopefully it's accessible to everyone, but it is chock full of studies and data and information that because to make an impact, it's got to be in the right hands of professionals. So
Where can they find this book? I know Amazon.
I'm glad you asked. You go to Amazon.com or digitalsoul.com. We're exclusively right now on Amazon. Hopefully that'll change before too long. But yeah, you could just go Google it or not Google it, but search it on Amazon.
Awesome. It's Our Digital Soul by Jenny Black and Bob Hutchins on Amazon.
Our very own.
I'm
proud.
really excited to. So the next episode, just give us a little preview of what what we should be talking about on the next episode around this book.
Yeah, we'll shift it to a little more hopeful vibe of, okay, what are some things that you can do to heal? Because we're all, I'll leave you with this, since we're on this topic, in addictive counseling and addictive therapy and professionals who work with those who are addicted to whatever it may be, one of the signs they say that you have a real issue, and to be honest with yourself, is what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you open your eyes in the morning you wake up? I know for me and for many people, it may not be a drug or an opioid, but I reach over and I grab my phone. Right?
Yeah.
So
2 things, coffee and phone.
Yeah, coffee and phone.
You can tell what you're addicted to.
Yeah. So we'll talk next time about how to unravel
Keep
from
the
that.
coffee, leave the phone.
Yeah. Unravel from that and, heal from that in a path forward. And I'd love to talk about, what's next and and how we're promoting this, some things I'm speaking at, et cetera. So.
Well, awesome. This has been a great conversation, you guys. Follow us on YouTube and wherever podcasts are delivered.
Yeah.
Awesome. Until next time, guys.
All right.
Bye.